So the sun's kind of setting, so I'm going to try to finish this video in time before it gets completely dark. But I wanted to make this prediction video before any more news comes out. But I think that Pedro Pascal, he's going to be the face of the next phase of the MCU. I just watched the movie on Thursday and was thinking about it for a couple days. But really the reason begins before I even watching the movie. I think first his star casting. He's way more famous than anybody in the MCU right now, besides Tom Holland. So since the end of Endgame, right, there hasn't been a main central character to tie all the events together. Been different stories that have been going on. There have been some stories that have been like really, really big, like Deadpool making over $1 billion, Spider-Man making over $1 billion. And there's been other movies that have been more, less well received, I would say. And there hasn't been like one central character through that. And so I think in the next phase, they definitely are going to try to return to that. There's already a bit of a return with having a central villain, with having Dr. Doom being cast as Robert Downey Jr. again, as sort of an evil version of Tony Stark. So I think the fact that he is way more famous and has this huge crossover appeal, he does like huge franchises like The Mandalorian. He also does like little indie movies like Eddington. He does rom-coms like Materialists. He also does like macho movies like Gladiator. He was in a hit TV show, The Last of Us, which also sort of demonstrates the fact that he's able to draw a big audience to like what should be a niche project. That was a adaptation of a video game based on zombies. Not exactly a broadly appealing story, but with his presence, it helped make it so that a ton of people actually watched that show. And that's what Marvel is hoping to do with setting him up to be the face of the MCU. They're trying to bring all these different types of people back to their stories, and they want to get a lot of people watching it at once. So that's the first part, this sort of star casting. The second part, connecting to that, they made this movie a completely fresh start. A lot of the marketing focused on the retro-futuristic style, totally different than the rest of the MCU. And they really showed off this, and they really emphasized the point that you didn't have to have seen any Marvel movie to go in and enjoy this movie. Kevin Feige even did an interview a couple of days ago before the release, just saying that like, oh yeah, you don't need to have done any homework to enjoy Fantastic Four. That's totally true. So I think that combination, having this huge, broad, appealing star, and then this fresh start, they're hoping to hook a bunch of people on this movie. And then the fact that he is going to be in Doomsday, which this isn't a spoiler, this was already announced with the whole casting thing. And they're hoping to get people back on track into the MCU with that. And there's not a lot of other movies that are coming out before that. I think maybe only Spider-Man comes out in between Doomsday. I'll have to double check that. But yeah, there's not any other characters they're announcing for Avengers Doomsday. So those were the non-spoiler parts. Now I'm going to talk about what I saw in the movie that made me convinced that he's going to be the next face of the MCU. So the first part is he has a lot of leadership characteristics similar to Tony Stark, but I feel like updated for a 2025 hero. You can't just do a straight reboot of the 2008 Iron Man, because that guy, that version of Tony Stark was modeled after a tech billionaire genius, kind of like Elon Musk, right? In public opinion, has turned a lot on Elon Musk and on, tech billionaires in general. So the whole individualistic, like I know better than everyone else, that type of leadership, that has fallen, I would say, out of fashion now in 2025. And it's much more focused on this kinder, gentler forms of masculinity and of leadership. And I think the fact that they're choosing a character who has been this sort of guardian figure in already two huge TV series with Mandalorian, where he's protecting this innocent, cute little alien, and then in The Last of Us, where he's protecting this innocent kid. They're leaning into that aspects of what people think about Pedro Pascal as this protective, caring person. And again, they've thrown in a baby into this movie as well. I think they're basically trying to create a different version of aspirational masculinity that is appealing to everybody and minimally off-putting to anybody. And I think they broadly succeeded with this character. He's still this super genius. He's making new discoveries. He's making new tech. So he has a lot of like really cool things about him, but he's very focused on his family. He's very, well, again, they say the word family so much in this movie. It's kind of nauseating. It's almost annoying, but there's this collaborative spirit of them. There's this more, value on the group rather than on the individual, which I think is a big difference than what we had with Tony Stark. Of course, he got there, right? He had a transformation over the arc, which made him an interesting character. But I think they're trying to start this next phase of the MCU at a different point than where they started in 2008. The next point I would say is the world that they built in the Fantastic Four. It's really cool. There's really cool retro-futuristic 1960s type world, the space age, a lot of cool sets and stuff like that. But I kind of felt like it was a lot of cool sets. They don't really interact, or like they're not very integrated with the outside world, I would say. This is sort of exemplified in two big ways. I would say first is the way that they live. They live in a giant tower. It looks like this huge like fortress that is just separated from the rest of New York. And they live all together, and there's a scene of them like looking down at a crowd, and it's like very much this sort of like us versus them type of vibe. They don't really have any deep relationships with anybody in the outside world, besides the Thing has like a sort of quasi barely like crush on some school teacher, but it's not that deep. And then even the final battle, right? The final battle takes place in New York. There's supposed to be the stakes of all humanity, blah, 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 all that. But it's totally empty. It looks totally empty, and it is totally empty. They put everybody underground, so that the only real quote unquote risk that is happening is the baby, right? And that's just a very internal to the group and intimate stake that they have. Sure, you get the motivation of it, and it works for the movie, but it did get me kind of thinking that they're just kind of a unit with the five of them now that you could easily jettison to a different world, a different timeline, like the core MCU timeline. And it's not like we're gonna like lose out on these other characters that we really care about. So I kind of think that's part of the draw, is that they're trying to make it easy to move these characters into the core MCU. And then finally, there's the post-credit scene, right? Doctor Doom is stealing their baby. So of course the next movie is going to be about them trying to get the baby back. And they're going to be the central characters because they have the biggest emotional need to save the baby, and Reed Richards sort of being their leader among them. So that's kind of the story reason why I think that Reed Richards and Pedro Pascal are going to be the face of the next phase of the MCU. But let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you think somebody else is going to be the face of the MCU and why. So comment below.